Hello everyone, it's Gigabeef here, and BSG have just dropped the largest set of endgame balancing adjustments for top tier ammo that we have ever seen, as well as a few other things that are impactful on the meta as well. But ammo first, the notorious 7.62x39 BP has been removed, yes that is right, removed from the traders completely, along with M61 for the 7.62x51 caliber and PS12B for the Ash 12. M855A1 for 5.56 has been removed from Skier 4, along with impact grenades and 9x21 BT, the top round for the new SR2M SMG. We have some tiering changes for M80, M62 and 45 ACP AP, which has all been moved to Peacekeeper level 4. All of these were Peacekeeper 3 in the previous patch, with M80 being Peacekeeper 2 in the patch before that. As a reminder, to unlock Peacekeeper 4, you need to be at least level 37. Apparently you can only get 100 M80 each reset now and 50 M62, but I haven't seen that myself as of yet. As if that wasn't enough, then PS12B, M80 and 9x21 BT have all been banned from the flea market as well. But on the flip side, APSX for the MP7 has now been added to the workbench as a craftable ammo. Let's take a deep breath for a second. These changes are of course extremely impactful to the mid and late game stages of Tarkov, so it remains to be seen how this will go. It's worth pointing out that BP, M61 and PS12B are still craftable in the workbench level 3, so they are available to players, but the amount of ammo that you can store up is clearly greatly diminished. Previously, players who had the unlocks could use each trader reset to clear out Prapor of his full stock, which was most recently 120 BP per reset, which led to many players having more rounds than they could ever use in their raids. Now, with a base timer of BP crafting being 16 hours and 40 minutes, this comes to about 170 rounds per day if you are constantly crafting it, which is really not that many. Of course, as you level up the crafting skills, this gets faster, but you can see how much of a diminished supply this is relatively speaking. You also can't craft anything else in the workbench at the same time if you don't have an elite skill level, so you lose out on all the potential money made from crafts that didn't happen, with an opportunity cost as well. Personally, I think that M80 being moved to Peacekeeper 4 is overkill, and that, currently at least, it was fine being on Peacekeeper 3. I do think it could do with having a craft. This is one that I think people will have the most issue with, and it pretty much kills the RFB as a weapon because you may as well use 7.62 PS instead. By the time you get to it and the ammo that goes with it that's actually any good, it's already been superseded by other guns. As far as what this means for the mid to end game meta now, with no armor changes so far, we'll still have to focus on high penetration. People are kind of acting as if these top rounds have been deleted on the game, but it really depends on whether rogues and raiders are still farmable in decent quantities to use BP regularly. I know that they have replaced some of their spawns with PS ammo, but I do believe that they still spawn with BP. It will reduce the amount of BP that we see overall in the bulk of the committed but not hyper hardcore section of the community. Likewise with M80 and M62, as they're on level 4 traders, we will still see them in the endgame, but potentially to a slightly lesser extent as people have to manage their ammo a little bit more carefully. Outside of these, the main contender for me is the MCX, which fires bullets with one higher pen than 7.62 BP, albeit with slightly lower damage, but this was a great weapon last wipe, and unless it gets bumped as well in some way, it should be propelled into the spotlight this time around. Yes, the ammo is at Peacekeeper 4 too, but as it's still purchasable, you'll be able to get much more of this than any of the others that typically fire on full auto that are relying on crafting recipes. In my mind, it could become the new BP. Secondly, the SVD is also starting to look pretty good. Whilst this gun has always had issues due to a struggle in balancing ergo and recoil in the builds, along with its higher price because of Punisher Part 6, the ammo in 7.62 54R is plentifully available. We have PS rounds at Prapor 3, which are just as good as M62, and SNB is just as good as M61 at Prapor 4. Another seemingly unrelated change that could actually buff the SVD fairly dramatically is the scav durability adjustments. As of today, we seem to be getting scav weapons with the same actual durability but much higher maximums. This means that many of the scav weapons are now usable if you take them out of raid and then repair them. The unrepairability of scav guns has been a problem for a while, practically making them worthless most of the time, but this should boost the supply of SVDs found from scavs that are potentially good enough for a PMC raid too. Another round that is still good is the 3.66 APM ammo. If you're missing something like the RFB, APM out of a VPO 209 does practically the same job but with better stats and bigger mags. It is a little lower on accuracy, so you won't be shooting rogues at 400 meters, but it can be bought at Mechanic 3, crafted at Workbench 2 and bought on the flea as well. It's nice and available, if a little pricey per round, but it can be a decent alternative to the RFB and M80. A final piece of ammunition that could work out is the SP6 cartridge found on Prapor 3 for the VSS or the ASVAL. While these weapons can be tricky to use, SP6 itself is literally 1 pen lower than 7.62 BP and has the same damage. One to think about. Outside of these, naturally M855A1 for 5.56 and BS rounds for 5.45 will continue to work adequately, only suffering a bit of a lack of damage that comes with these intermediate rifle rounds. It is worth mentioning something about the impact nades here. Obviously with their removal on the traders, we will have to work hard saving up these grenades from boxes around the map. But the silver lining is that we don't need to complete Grenadier anymore, at least that is what I always used to use them for, because this now unlocks 9x39 BP instead at Prapor 4. Maybe you're really keen and want to use that ammo specifically for the VSS, but the majority of players who aren't going for Kappa will probably just give this quest a miss or slowly complete it through the course of the patch. The other change that will be very impactful too is that the Voodoo and Razor scopes are no longer present on the traders at all, so are find in raid only. This means they are now very expensive on the flea market, with the only source of them being weapons boxes or possibly high level AI such as bosses and guards. This is the first time that we've seen regular scopes get binned from the traders by BSG, and it does make me wonder if this trend is going to continue. Nikita has mentioned in the past that he wants to take a boiling frog approach to the game, where he slowly nudges the parameters to where he wants, as a wholesale shift would be too much for the community to take in one go. As we get used to each change, we then get another one, further restricting what we can buy from the traders and sell on the flea market, amongst other things, which does ultimately seem like the game plan for Tarkov in general. Do not be surprised, and probably even come to expect these kinds of restrictions to continue in the future, and various members of the community have spoken before about optics and suppressors, for example, being so freely available that it causes the endgame to be stale and uninteresting. Tarkov probably will end up looking more like a hardcore playthrough than it does today as time goes on. How far they want to take it, only time will tell. One comment that I see about these changes a lot is how it hurts casual players. Yes, there might be players that this will not affect either through farming, crafting or whatever, but those guys are never going to be affected badly by any changes because they are either streamers or extremely proficient players in general. The broad majority of players, however, who usually grind X quests to get BP as a reward for the rest of the wipe, will find it harder to use these rounds brainlessly now in every raid, so I am hoping that we will finally be moving away from nearly 2 years of constant mutant RD usage in the late game. Very casual players were never using BP rounds to begin with, at least not last patch, and this way, given everyone is limited to a small stock from crafting, if you only play 3 to 4 raids a day at most, you'll probably never run out if stacking mags with the 120 that you get intelligently. Those who play more and don't have the means to farm up tough locations in raid should struggle more, as they have to stretch the same amount of ammo across a longer play session. Again, we'll have to see, and I hope I'm right, but either way it will be fascinating to see what comes of patch 13 with these changes as we progress into the mid and late wipe. As usual, a big shout out to all my patrons, hit all the buttons if you enjoyed the video, and as always, have fun in your raids.